This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Northeast Ford and Elise Harney Real Estate.
Happy Moxie Monday, Mary.
It's a great day to be Moxie because we have a great guest today.
We do. I'm super excited.
So today's guest is Rachel Doriss, who is the Vice President and Design Director for Pollack Textiles. And I first met Rachel on Instagram through a spoof article that I had written about being the owner of a design company called Sisyphus Design, devoted to aspirational clutter. And Rachel reached out to me through Instagram, and I was quite taken that she actually thought that I was worth connecting with because she's so talented and so creative.
She is.
And the joy that she gets from her work and from her life is apparent in all of her Instagram posts, which is how I really know her.
Yeah.
And she went to Rhode Island School of Design and worked her way up and was scrappy and full of moxie. And I think we're really going to enjoy listening to her story.
Northeast Ford offers great sales and service, including a no-charge pickup and delivery for any service, even with oil changes. And they offer 2-year unlimited oil changes with any vehicle purchase, new or pre-owned.
Northeast Ford makes buying, selling, or trading in your car super easy. They have charging stations for your electric vehicle and a ready cash now offer and vehicle check on the spot if you wish to sell your vehicle. And they provide help with all the paperwork.
They service 6 counties, and they are located at 182 Route 44 in Millerton, where you can swing by and see Lan and his great sales team.
Or visit them online at www.northeastfordmillerton.com. So, Rachel, welcome to Main Street Moxie. We're really happy to have you here.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, the first question we always start out with is, what do you think of when you hear the word moxie? And then how have you seen it demonstrated in your own life?
Okay, well, first thing, the word moxie sounds old-fashioned to me, right? People don't really use it out there so much on the street or anywhere in my life besides reading about you guys and this podcast. And it got me thinking, like, okay, what is moxie besides the soda, Baby Maine, right?
Right.
And so I looked it up, and it is energy and kind of inspiration and really showing yourself out there in the world and being kind of free and powerful with who you are. So I guess that is how I would describe moxie.
I feel like that does describe you. So
Sure.
How do you make that happen in your life?
It's something that I think you don't have awareness of. If you go out there and think, I'm going to have moxie, that's a little bit too controlled. I think you just have to go with your inspiration and what fuels you and put that into action without too much analyzing of what you're doing. So I could look at the length and kind of the trajectory of my life and see a lot of moxie throughout those years, but I don't think you have awareness of when you're really getting things into gear. You're just doing and being and reacting and moving forward.
Right. So did that all come naturally to you now that you're looking back?
Yes.
Those moments of moxie?
I think so. And it doesn't mean those moments of moxie are necessarily fun. You know, things can be scary and uncomfortable and challenging, but you can look back at times and think, wow, I can't believe I did that, or I really worked hard to do that during those years, and look at where I am now. If I hadn't tried that, and with the risk of possibly failing, I wouldn't be where I am today.
So it wasn't effortless. You really put the hard work in.
Yeah, I think what is effortless is just being yourself, you know, and what sort of comes naturally to you and gets your heart beating. And to me, you have to tap into that kind of energy and what inspires you and what moves you and what you would really enjoy doing in your life day to day. And then from there, you build on that.
So your career is in textiles. Can you define for us or explain what that is for the layperson who doesn't know what textiles are?
I am the design director of a company called Pollack, and we are a textile company based in Soho in New York, and we design woven fabrics for interiors, so both commercial and residential interiors. So I design collections twice a year, so like a fashion designer, a fall and a spring collection. And we launch those collections, and I work with weavers, so different manufacturers around the world. So I work with over 100 different mills worldwide.
Wow.
In different countries.
Wow.
So a lot in Europe, in the US, let's see, in the UK, Turkey, India, and I work with these mills that specialize in certain yarns and constructions. So I put together the 2 collections a year, which are maybe 30 different patterns in multiple different colorways twice a year, and I have a design studio, and we sell these fabrics to the trade only, so to interior designers and architects. So you can't find these fabrics in a fabric store. You can't just go down the street and go buy it. You know, it's this kind of very to the trade only world that a lot of us don't know exists, but it does exist, and it's lovely, and I love working in textiles at this capacity.
So it's a niche within a niche within a niche within the artistry world.
Yes. Yep.
That's really cool.
So you don't do weaving now at this stage in your career. You design the patterns. Do you prescribe what yarns or fibers should be used?
Yes.
And then find the people to do it?
Yes. So I'm a trained weaver, so I have put in my hours of weaving. My grandmother was a weaver. I love textiles, and I grew up working a lot with fabrics. I can talk about that in a bit if you wish.
Right,
sure.
But I know weaving, I know construction, I know fiber, I know yarns, and I know which mills specialize in certain constructions. So when people think of a textile designer, they often think of pattern.
Right.
I love flowers, or I love this type of pattern, but pattern is just one element that goes into it. So I start with the fiber, and then the way the yarn is spun, and the construction of the woven fabric, and then the pattern is also part of it. And then once that is created, it has a whole other life when an interior designer puts it on a piece of furniture or puts it in a space. So that's their job. I'm here to create the actual goods.
Oh. When you're designing, do you ultimately think, I think this pattern would be great for a sofa, or I want to design it with fabric that would be appropriate for a sofa versus a curtain?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So at the beginning because it's design, I'm making textiles to function in spaces. So I have to think about what scale to use, what color to use, what type of yarn. You know, I probably won't use a linen in a commercial setting. You know, if there's a fabric that would be used in a high traffic airport, for example, it's going to have very different yarns and fibers as opposed to a luxurious sofa that someone has at home. Right. So all of those things are taken in consideration every time for every fabric.
So how do you get into that?
That's a good question. So I think there's a lot of pressure on young people to figure out what they want to do.
Yes.
And I think that's really unfair because it might limit their exploration into other things. So I always tell people to really get back to what it is in life that you would do that you wouldn't get paid for. You know, like, do you love teaching people? Do you love to be outside? Do you love bicycles? You know, what is the one thing that you would enjoy doing day to day? And
my sons would say sleeping.
There you go.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
He could be a sleep expert. You never know.
Oh, there you go.
Mattress tester.
So I grew up on Cape Cod in Massachusetts and pre-internet, as you both probably did. So you really were figuring things out and making things and finding inspiration around you rather than being bombarded with all this visual stuff. My grandmother, like I said, she was a weaver. She lived in Western Mass in Deerfield. And she was of the generation where women just knew how to do everything. You know, they knew how to make everything and fix everything. And she was really into textile art. So she taught me to sew really young. So I probably started sewing in 3rd grade. And I was really into clothes. So we would go down to the fabric store and pick out a pattern, meaning like the pattern for sewing. And then we would pick out the fabric and we would make things. She also taught me how to weave and bead weave, basket weave, and crochet and knit. So these were things that I was really into from a young age, and making friendship bracelets. And I think one of my first surface design projects when I was, I think, 3rd or 4th grade, she made some curtains for me out of an old sheet and sent them to me on Cape Cod, and I splatter painted them in a very 80s way. But I was always into fabric, and then got into thrift shopping in high school and would remake vintage clothing and dye fabric and do boutique. So that's what I was doing in my free time without thinking that there could possibly be a job in this, not even ever considering a career. But I was also into art, so I did a lot of painting and all sorts of different art surface materials in high school, and eventually became an art major and went to UMass Amherst in their art program. But while I was there, I was doing mostly painting and printmaking, but in my free time doing sewing, and I took a silkscreen class there, which I loved. And then I thought I really should be studying textiles. So I looked at different schools, and I transferred to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, and focused on textiles. Still not thinking that you could ever have a job in this, but just loving textiles. And I got really serious because I was very focused at the school. If you had asked me at that point what I might do as a job, maybe go to craft fairs or move to Vermont and be a weaver. But while I was at that school, we went on a field trip to New York City, and that's when I realized you could actually have a job in it. And we visited different textile companies. And at that moment, a seed was planted. Like, okay, I have this education. This is where the industry is. This is where I could have a job. I'm scared to death of moving to New York, but I have to at least try. And so that's how I personally got into this field. That was very long. But
yeah, but interesting. I'm fascinated with the relationship with your grandmother. I just feel like what a special emotional thread, and that
pun intended.
I know. I'm glad you noticed that. And I just love that you were accepting of the knowledge that she was passing down. My grandmother emigrated from Ireland and was a accomplished knitter, and none of us picked it up. It just wasn't, I don't know why.
It didn't give you like fire. You weren't excited about it in a way that you wanted to do it, which I think is totally fine.
Yeah.
My mom is an oboe player. And,
yes.
And we all had to take instruments as kids, my brothers and I. I did piano, one brother did cello, and the other did French horn. And we were all good at music, but none of us wanted to do it. And we all went to art school.
Oh, wow.
But you're all creative.
Yeah, all creative, sure. So there was that same kind of electricity.
Right.
But you don't necessarily have to do the same thing someone else did.
No, but it just creates a really lovely picture that how much your grandmother, your grandparents impacted you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it probably pleased her as well.
Yeah, it did. And then when I moved to New York and I got this job and I would send her samples and swatches, they were so beyond her weaving technically, because she was using like 4 and 8 harness hand looms. Of course. And all of a sudden I'm working with these like state-of-the-art jacquard looms in Europe, and I would send her these fabrics. She would be like, oh my gosh, Rach, how do they do this? So that was really fun to kind of still collaborate, as she was very elderly, and she would make things out of my fabrics and give them to friends. So it was kind of this cool full circle.
Right.
Yeah.
And how does that play out with your own daughter?
Well, I think growing up, being around something that is like so established, she thinks it's normal.
Right.
You know,
right.
So she'll come to work with me sometimes in Soho, and here we have this amazing studio, and she just finished school last week.
Right.
And I had nothing for her to do on Friday, so she came to work with me, and I said, why don't you come to this meeting with me? I'm meeting with this Italian mill, so one of the best high-end Italian mills in Italy. the Franco and Riccardo, they come, and she comes to the meeting, and she lasted about 5 minutes. She was like, can I go now?
You guys are so boring.
Yeah. So I think she,
it's part of the air she breathes.
How does it impact her? Hopefully positively, to
Right.
think that she could, do whatever she wants, whatever subject it might be.
Well, it takes some through osmosis.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
And like my daughter who's here today, I hope she doesn't, bust in here, but she's out there coloring, and now lately she's been like, oh, Mommy, are you making a magazine? Because she knows, like, when I'm designing, it's often putting it together, but it's fun to, kind of share that.
Yeah. And it's cool for her to see that.
And she likes to now tell me, like, when she goes to her art class, she's like, oh, I'm an artist too.
Yep.
So I just think that's so great to be able to share that.
Sometimes she'll do drawings and say, can you make a fabric out of this?
Oh, that's so cool.
And recently, during the pandemic, we were all just totally flying by the seat of our pants. And I was working from home, and that didn't necessarily mean that I was sitting at my table at home. Mm-hmm. So I did a few drawings while she was at tennis in Brooklyn in the car. So I would bring my supplies and do some sketches. And so one tennis class, she came out and saw these sketches of this kind of abstract sort of mountain scene that I had done, and then I worked on it at home. And then she saw the first woven samples, and when she came to the office on Friday, she saw an upholstered piece out of the fabric. But originally, the inspiration for that fabric came from watching the movie The Eagle Huntress. Did you ever see that? It's about this girl in Mongolia who hunts, who learns to hunt with an eagle, and she's 12 and has to climb. Talk about Moxie,
right?
Has to climb up to the eagle nest on a cliff and get the baby eagle, and then train it to hunt. And she competes with this. But anyway, in this movie, they're in Mongolia, and they're nomadic people, and they live on the plains, and the mountains in the background are just unbelievable. So I kept looking at the mountains when we were watching the movie, and I took a photo of the mountains, and that's what I was drawing. So she saw, from the very inspiration from this movie, to my sketch during tennis class, to doing the drawings at home, to the woven samples, and then the color trials, and then to the final upholstered piece. I can show you a picture on my phone afterwards. But so for her, she's sitting playing her video games on this sofa, and she saw the birth of this idea.
Right. So we think we could give birth to a fabric called Moxie.
Oh, yeah.
So we'd like you to work on that after the interview.
Well, actually, it's a great idea, and I don't have any fabrics in the collection called Moxie. So
I see a whole line.
Go. The merch has started.
Elise Harney Real Estate is the #1 real estate agency for the tri-state region, and they provide a comprehensive overview of the regional market spanning Litchfield, Dutchess, Columbia, and Berkshire counties.
Elise Harney Real Estate serves 40 unique communities with 35 years of experience. They have a team of knowledgeable real estate professionals to work with you to buy or sell your house.
Their offices are located in Salisbury, Millerton, Norfolk, Falls Village, and Riverton, or you can visit them online at www.harneyrealestate.com.
You talked about your inspiration for this mountain fabric. When I follow you, or I do follow you on Instagram, and sometimes you'll be on vacation and taking a picture of ice over a puddle or beach grass or ferns or something, and you'll say this is inspiration. So can you talk about, when you look at something, what is going on in your brain that translates it to a fabric?
Sure. Well, first of all, for inspiration, I think there's so much everywhere that it doesn't have to be huge. The smallest thing could give you inspiration and could inspire whatever you're working on, whether you're a fine artist or a writer or textile artist. I think it could be the smallest thing that you focus on and you interpret and keep building. And that can go into a whole collection. So what's going through my brain is just gathering and absorbing. And as I'm walking around, wherever it is, in nature or in New York, we're absorbing these things unconsciously and kind of storing them. And then a seed could be planted and come out transformed at a later date. And that may also be color. Color is a huge part of my job. And a lot of companies follow color trends. And that's really interesting to look at color trends. But that's something that I don't do and we don't do within the studio. And people are always asking, like, how do you do color? How do you know what's happening with color? And it is just kind of a gut reaction. You know how it is when you have seen something for a long time and you get tired of it, and then you see something unexpected and it just gives you a little boost, and then that might inspire your next move without knowing it. And I might see people, I have 2 other designers in the studio, they may do something with color that triggers something within me that I don't realize, and it becomes one of my coworkers calls it hive mind. Like we're all working together, and someone might do something that looks perfect with something else that someone else is doing. So the inspiration, there is no formula. It's not like I see the ice on top of a puddle and say, that is the perfect thing for a window fabric. But perhaps it is.
Right.
And I think about like the luster with the certain yarn against a matte yarn. But there's no formula. I think you just have to look and absorb and be open and be you.
So I feel like that's life advice too, because being open to inspiration from other people or what you see in the world, even if you're not an artist, do you find that mindset has just carried over into other areas of your life?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think there's so much to learn from other people. And if you're open to listening, you could take just a little something that someone said, and that can help you somehow in your life.
Well, that's what we're hoping to do with this podcast, through interviews with people like you.
Well, that's how I met you.
Right, because you needed help with your clutter.
I needed help with my clutter.
Wait, is that it? From your Sisyphus?
Yeah.
You're like one of my favorite design Instagrams. I love Sisyphus design.
So just to let everyone else know, Rachel and I met out of a spoof article because I have absolutely no interior design sense, nothing in my DNA to suggest anything artistic or creative in my house.
I'm crying from laughing.
All I have is my clutter. And I created a spoof article for the design issue of Main Street called Sisyphus Design, about rolling the rock up the hill of a shoe rack, of it, putting the shoes on, and at night all the shoes would be off. And you reached out to me.
Yeah. Well, so I was just passing through Millerton and getting a coffee, and I picked this up and I started reading it, and I was like, wait, is this for real? What is this? And I thought it was, a design firm, and then I kept reading it, and I was like, oh my God, that it triggered something in me that I just loved. And you said something about we went down to our local shop, the yellow and blue shop, obviously IKEA.
Yes.
And then one other thing you said in the article is not being a slave to cleaning up after my children, something like that. And it just is this never-ending thing. And if you just let it be, I think you could be a little happier than trying to control this beast.
Yes,
that will
it is a beast.
Never end.
It never ends. And although I'm at the other side of child rearing and the nest is emptying,
okay,
and that shoe rack is dwindling down in what's on it. So maybe there is an end. But that was, I tell you, that was when you reached out to me, like, oh my gosh, maybe there is a future for me in aspirational clutter.
I think
but
you even said you had an upcoming show at Mass Mocha.
Yeah.
When I read it, I was like, I want to go see that show.
Well, if you're listening, Mass Mocha, I am available. But I want to come back to something you said in a blog interview about, and it really struck me because this word passion is so overused. Like, find your passion when you're talking about young people. Find your passion. Go with your passion. And you said, start with what gives you energy, joy, and excitement. And I feel like that's such it's more of a humble, accessible way to start thinking about your life. And I just wanted to tell you that I like that. I don't know if you have anything more to say about that, but I that struck me as...
Well, it goes back to what I said, what would you do for free? Like,
Right.
what do you enjoy doing day to day? And I think finding your passion, I think young people have a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And my daughter was saying recently, like, I don't know what I like. I don't know what I want to do. And I think she just is absorbing the pressure that kids have. And I was like, that's not what you should be thinking about.
Right.
You should be thinking about playing.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
play. That's
Right.
all you should do. And it'll come to you.
Does your work still feel like play?
At times.
Yes.
There are times when I lose myself in my work, and that is when I'm drawing or when I'm sitting and figuring things out, and when I'm doing color work. Color work is way harder than you might think.
It
or
is
maybe
so
you know
hard.
that
I
it's
have
hard.
no idea what
It
you
is
mean.
so hard.
It's my biggest challenge as a designer because it's like, color. Where's the color wheel? What color should I pick for this? What matches? What
Yeah.
doesn't work?
So when I'm doing, when I'm choosing colors for a textile, I have to consider the vertical yarns, which are the warp yarns, and the horizontal yarns, which are the weft yarns or the fill yarns, and what happens when those yarns come together. So how they mix, where you want contrast, so whether it's value or color contrast, and also making an overall color that would fit interiors and also trend. You know, as I said, I don't follow trends, but you have to think about what is happening out there, like what looks kind of dated compared to what looks fresh.
Well, aren't you kind of setting the trend? Because you said you're kind of like, fashion
Yeah.
design and the fact that you come out with, seasons and whatnot, but aren't you in a way setting the trend
I
for the
would
next
hope so, and
year or
I
two?
think I am.
Yeah.
But this is something that I think about and I preach in a way is you can't do what you've already done over and over and over again.
Right.
And if you think about that for like music, right?
Right.
Pop music, for example, if something comes out that you are like, what is that? And it sparks your interest and you've never heard something like that. It gets your heart beating, right?
Right.
But you didn't know that you wanted that.
Yeah.
Right.
It came out and then you were inspired. And it's the same thing in design. I can't just keep repeating my successes. I have to do something that interior designers don't know that they want yet.
Right.
And I'm also working way in the future. So right now I'm finishing up our fall 2023 collection.
Oh, wow.
And I'm starting ideas for spring 24.
Wow.
Because this process takes so long. It takes about 6 to 9 months to design the fabric and get it ready to order, and then another 9 months to weave it and sample it and launch it.
Wow.
So I'm thinking into the future, and that could be intimidating and get bogged down. Like, I don't know what people want. I don't know what will sell.
Right.
But you have to kind of believe in what that, like what gets your heart beating. I think it's cool. I think it looks good. So I'm just going to go with that, and it's a risk. And I work for a company that thankfully supports that. So a lot of times, not a lot of times, but from time to time, I will create a fabric that I don't think might be the best seller, but I think it might tell the world who we are and make a statement. So think about that for fashion, with couture fashion. A lot of those garments are probably not selling that much or making that much money, but it's telling the world who they are, and it's called a loss leader. So you're being a leader in that. And then within your collection, you have the kind of the bread and butter, like the plain textured, neutral sofa fabric. And that compared to the high pattern, high color, high texture fabric. So I don't even remember what you asked.
I don't know, but that was a great answer.
I think you have to trust your gut, basically, is what I'm trying to say, and take a risk. And I guess that would be called Moxie.
Yes. Absolutely.
I have follow-up questions for that are nothing to do with Moxie.
Okay.
But I'm just curious about the industry and learning about this industry. So
How do you then go about marketing that to, how does that work for your company? And, who are your clients and how do you network that and get, they then pick out, this is a favorite. And have you had ones that completely surprised you that they just took off? And then likewise others that you were so excited about that flopped? I was just, how does that happen?
When we market the collection, we will launch the collection with a lot of marketing through our website and Instagram and magazines. And we have salespeople that go and show the collection to interior designers. So they'll either do presentations at the design firm, or if it's a residential designer, at their wherever their studio is. And I also do I'll do lectures and show the collection, or do educational continuing education CEUs lectures where I teach designers about textiles. So there's a lot of marketing that goes into that. But to answer your question, sure, there are things that I love that don't sell. Yep. But they look amazing and they've won awards and they're in magazines. But are they necessarily our best sellers? No. You know what's our best sellers? Those beautiful kind of workhorse sofa fabrics.
Right.
And they're gorgeous. I don't want to
Right. Not taken away from them. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, just to give sofa fabrics props, when I graduated from RISD, I did prints for fashion.
Okay.
So I was into making clothes and making patterns and silk screens for fashion. But I did all the weaving classes on the side. So I had all of the knowledge and the training for that. And then I went to New York and I just tried to find any job I could get. And I was commuting from Cape Cod to go on interviews in New York because I needed to have a paycheck to be able to live there, right? So the first job that I got was at a sweater company designing theme sweaters, like embellished.
Ugly Christmas sweaters?
Ugly Christmas sweaters before they were cool.
Yes.
So
I have one.
This was in '99. So it was like holiday sweaters, but for real, like not ironic.
Right.
At all.
Right. I have one.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, before it was a thing.
Yeah. So
maybe you have one of hers.
Yeah, but we won't say the brand because I don't want to.
I'll say it afterwards.
Yeah. So really bright colors, but with embroidery and applique. And I was working on Halloween, I think it was Halloween 2000, because this was in '99, so you're working a year ahead. And my boss said, I want you to do ghosts trick-or-treating. So I had to draw these ghosts, and there were these felt ghosts that were attached. And I think one was a witch, one had a pumpkin, Halloween bucket. And then I was like, what's my next ghost going to be? So it was a hobo ghost with a stick with a stuffed bag. Anyway, that was just to get me to New York and start to make money, even though it was nothing. And then from there I went to Echo Design for scarves. And that was in fashion, and that was really interesting. One thing that I noticed in that job is that it was so trend focused that you couldn't do your own ideas. And coming out of school, that was just a reality check for me, because I thought, oh, hey, I've got good ideas. I'm right out of school. Let's do these. But we had to kind of follow the fashion shows and see what was out there. And then I got this job at Pollack starting in 2000. And my idea of what interior fabrics were at that point was boring beige sofa fabrics. So to me, fashion was where you could be creative and have all these great ideas, and interiors was boring. But I was totally wrong, because what I found in interiors, especially at Pollack, is that I could actually sit down, have my own ideas, take the time to develop them, and then they also have longevity. Right. So a fabric that's in our collection will be in the collection until it doesn't sell anymore. But in fashion, you only have 6 months and then it's gone. Right. So you might have a really good idea, but it
That's
continues.
Cool.
So it was a little slower paced, and I could be much more creative and actually do my own drawings and ideas.
In an interview that I read, blog interview, you talked about advice you'd received about life being a series of rungs on a ladder. And I feel that the stories that you're telling kind of belie that incremental one thing, then another thing falls into place, then another thing falls into place. You really only have to think ahead for the next rung. You don't need to see the whole ladder. And I was struck by that piece of advice, and I was wondering if you had any further thoughts on it.
Yeah, sure. So that quote was actually from a man named John Sullivan, who was the owner of American Silk Mills. And I was on an interview in '99 showing my portfolio, and he took the time to meet with me, but he didn't have a job opening. And he was the one that said that. And going back to what we said earlier in this interview, like inspiration from other people, that comment really helped me. So here I was in 1999 moving to Brooklyn from Cape Cod and not having any money and not having like a solid job. And he gave the analogy of the ladder. And what he said was, I think he said there are like three main things to like really start building your life. And first was like a place to live, a job, and friends. So a community. So first you might get the place to live, then you might get the job, and then the friends, and then you can add on other tertiary other rungs. And that might be living near the subway, a grocery store on your commute. You know, all these little things that start to, or maybe a parking spot. That would be like the big sort of
that's like
golden
lottery.
Thing. Yeah, that would be like the top rung. When you get the parking spot in New
on
York,
Maslow's
you're like,
hierarchy.
I've done it. So, but I think it's really good. Don't look at the whole ladder. It's too overwhelming. And don't try to like shoot for that top one, because you'll miss opportunities along the way. You might think you want that top rung, but life has a way of shifting and giving you unexpected opportunity. And that might bring you down a path that gives you something more that you never would have wondered about. And if you're not open to that and you're so like tight about that top rung, you know, who knows? Who knows where you could go or what you could do or who you might meet, or what that person might bring into your life that you never would have tried.
And those blinders would have kept you from seeing it, you know, that focus on the top.
Well, in that analogy, was there, because there's the bigger, you know, idea, there's a bigger dream that you're kind of working towards. Was that like part of it, that, you know what that is, but you're going to go to the micro level and focus on one step at a time to reach that? Or was it that you weren't even going to consider that at the top of it?
I didn't know what it was, because I was just like, I'm moving to New York. I think I knew there were certain things I wanted to do in my life. I knew that I wanted to have a kid someday. I knew that I wanted to have a career. And I really love nature as well. So how do you build that in as well and live in Brooklyn? So I've been able to achieve that in the recent years, and that's why I came through Millerton and met you.
And what about the parking spot?
Well, I'm on the wait list. It's going to be like 10 years.
Okay, you're going to have to update us on that.
Once I'm 112 on the wait list, but I'm very patient. And you know what's really funny? I was talking to my mom earlier this week, and she was like, I was just thinking, if you ever write a memoir, you have to say that you built your life on peanut butter and honey sandwiches.
It's a firm foundation.
Yeah, because through the years, I've always packed my lunch.
Yes.
You know, it's so expensive to buy your lunch every day. And I still pack my lunch every day. And just think of like the tens of thousands of dollars that I've saved.
Absolutely. And I'm right there with you.
And the other thing I don't do very often is take taxis or car service. I always take the subway or a bike. And just because I'm building and I'm trying to kind of shoot for something more. And, you know, you can't spend all your money on going out to eat to get there.
No, that's great. And that's great advice for young people as well, is that those little drops in the bucket add up after a while. Yeah. I want to switch, this is kind of a good segue, to your fashion, Moxie.
Oh, yeah.
So when you were describing yourself before going to thrift shops and creating something, I immediately thought Molly Ringwald in Pretty in Pink.
Right.
And I am amazed because I was looking through, because you're a big vintage person, I was thinking, what can I wear that's vintage today? And the only thing I could find was my high school softball jacket. I thought, that's not going to cut it. So the stuff that you put on me would just look not good. But on you, it looks amazing. So how do you know what's going to look good?
So this was something my grandmother said a long time ago, because we would make clothes together, and she was like, Rachel would look good in a paper bag.
Right. Well, okay, I could see that.
But it's about what you want. Like you wouldn't look good in the certain things that I would wear because it's not you.
Right.
You look good in what you're wearing.
Yeah.
And I have realized over the years that my wardrobe is kind of an extension of my expression. It has nothing to do with my job. It's something that I really have fun with on the side, and it's become kind of part of my shtick in a way.
Yes.
And people give me things all the time. I just have, people are always giving me things like, oh, well, this was my mother's and she never wore it and I'm not going to wear it, and it comes into my hands. And so I have this really great wardrobe, but it's very curated. And I also have friends that are fashion designers, and I get clothes from them, but I also save things for a long time. Like one of my favorite jean jackets that's in my headshot is this embroidered jean jacket. It's Wrangler, and I got it when I was 15 at a thrift store on Cape Cod. So there are certain things that I've held on to that kind of become my look. But I just throw things together last minute before I leave the house. I don't have time.
Right.
And I have a lot of really cool things that I've saved, and I've decided just to wear them. Like, why save them for a special occasion? Like, what even is a special occasion, especially since COVID? I'm going to wear my sequins on a Monday when I have no meetings, just because I feel like it.
I like that.
Yeah, why not? There's no reason not to. Don't save anything. It's like my grandmother started doing this towards the end of her life. She started using all of her silver to eat with every day. Why hold on to the silver?
Right.
And she was in her 90s. Use it. You know? Throw it in the dishwasher. Like, who cares?
It's true, but it's also the attitude, the confidence that you bring to what you put on. And I find that also with interior design. Like, I look at interior magazines and I see this big stack of books against the wall, and it looks like a design statement. But if I were to do that, it would just look like I was too lazy to put them back on the shelf. And maybe that's just in my head.
Well, I think you have to be careful with looking at design magazines, because you think that people actually live that way. But I maybe some people do, but real life
we know.
Yeah, like the piles of shoes.
Yes.
Like
Sisyphus.
Sisyphus, right? I can't remember where I read this or who said it, but a designer would have like the perfect bathroom, and then with all the little details, like the man's shaving. What is that? Like the soap brush?
Right, right.
And then they would come, and there would be like the disposable razor with like the dirty, like the toothpaste that was all mucked up on the counter. Like, that's the real life. So I think the stacks of books, and it looks so beautiful. You just have to be careful of not getting too hard on yourself because of the fantasy.
Right. Well, which is easy in this social media culture.
Sure.
I was just going to say, like, we're so bombarded with, people projecting their perfections.
Yeah.
Or perceived perfections.
But that's why I found your piece so inspiring, because now I just like leave the shoes all right when you walk in the door, because what am I going to do with my life? Spend my life organizing shoes? Like, no, I can't do it anymore. I'm just going to leave them, and then from time to time I'll put them back.
Yes.
Because it's not my shoes.
Right. Exactly. It's a daughter of mine.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our time together. So you've given a lot of advice for how to live a life, design a life. So what would you say, advice would you give, any recaps or anything new to people to help move their own Moxie needle in whatever way?
Well, I think that the best thing in life, whether this is Moxie or not, is to just be yourself, because you will never have that freedom if you don't let go of trying to be something you're not. Like the moment you can let go of trying to be someone else and really be yourself and feel kind of the power of that, and the positive feedback that you get from people, that's where you want to be. And so that's where the Moxie lies.
That's
love that.
great advice.
Yeah, I'm pondering that. I'm like, I can incorporate that a
could
little
do
more
that,
here.
Thorne.
I can do that a little more here. I think it's just the reminders of that too. I think sometimes we just get so lost in the everyday and the, staring at the shoes that aren't in the shoe rack and letting those things frustrate us. And, so I think that's great advice. And like, I was just thinking for myself, it's such a good reminder that like, I need to do more of that.
Yeah. And there's so much that we have to do to have these adult lives and take care of so much, and just the sheer number of like emails and bills and things that you have to do. If you only do that, you're going to die. You have to build in joy that is for you. Yeah. Not just like the joy of seeing your kid do well because you have put so much time and energy into it, but the joy of whatever it is, whatever you like to do, whether it's bird watching or laughing with your friends or whatever it is, you have to do it, because that's when you like become you again, and it gives you energy to like wake up and kind of slug through the next day,
That's great advice.
I love that.
Yeah. So, Rachel, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. This is such a thrill to be in Millerton and do something outside of New York. So thanks for
share
having
your
me.
Moxie.
Thank you. Mary, I love that interview. That was so fun. I'm so inspired right now.
I know. And it just seems like her inspiration it makes you think you can just take small steps and build to something bigger.
Well, the whole rung analogy, which you love.
I did. I thought that was really great advice, that, you don't come up with a finished product. You have to really build it, not to use a fabric design metaphor, but thread by thread, and weave it together into something that makes sense for you.
I thought that was really inspirational. I thought that was great advice for anyone, regardless if you're in the art world or not. And then you can take that advice in any facet of your life, really. And I love just her outlook on life and how, what would you do if you weren't getting paid for it? What would you want to do? I think that's such great advice, and it makes you think a little differently, because it makes you really soul search a bit. So when she said that, I kind of I sat back a little bit, and I was thinking, while listening still to her, but it's like, oh, what makes you happy? What is something you're so passionate about and you just love so much, you would love to be able to do every single day, regardless if you get paid for it or not? So I think that's a great, way to look at it. And she mentioned, the younger kids today and how much pressure there's in school and deciding on a career. But I think that can be applied to anyone at any point in their life, really. So I hope our listeners really, took inspiration from that, just like I did.
Well, yeah, and I was really taken with the trusting your gut, that if she felt a design was going to be the next thing, that confidence in her own instincts, which I'm sure did not happen overnight. I mean, that's something that you have to build over time and learn to trust yourself. And I just really admired this life that she's crafted, drawing on something that she and her grandmother did as a child. I just really admire that relationship, and a bit envious, I would have to say, that she had that relationship like that, and it's carried her through her whole life.
Yeah. It makes you a little nostalgic, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. So
it pulls at you, the heartstrings of it.
Anyway, I can't wait to see what Rachel designs for the future.
Yeah,
and I will be keeping track.
The Moxie line.
Oh, I definitely, if you're listening, Pollack Textiles, please get started on the Moxie line. So, all right, till next time, Thorin.
See ya.
This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Northeast Ford and Elise Harney Real Estate.